This is Slim's take. Yep, it's my take on the Bitcoin decoupling syndrome. We're going to look at Bitcoin and NASDAQ and compare those, as they were moving in lockstep for a long time. Now there's a disconnection, and it says there is risk in Bitcoin. And wait, there's more, because I'm going to show you even more looking at MicroStrategy in that stock, which I think is the canary in the coal mine. We'll take a look as we move into those charts in a few minutes. But first, I wanted to show you what I think is going on here and why things are changing. On Friday, October 10th, there was a sudden price drop. There was a huge volatility surge, and Bitcoin experienced a fast drop. Other cryptocurrencies fell, beyond fall. They really crashed, with many losing over 50% very quickly. Problem is that brokers offer crazy margins, and everybody's gotten comfortable with these cryptocurrencies seemingly only going up, and speculation is just crazy, and they are highly margined positions that were forced to liquidate. That caused a volatility spike as prices fell sharply on these liquidations, and unlike stocks, where you get a nice email or a phone call saying, bring some more money in, this is an automatic liquidation. So what happens is these are digital assets, and once the amount of money in the account goes below the management level, they simply liquidate it and let you know. And when you get into those big cascades to the downside, you never know where you're going to get executed on those. What happened is funding rates flipped. Well, what does that mean? Well, traders in futures started to have to pay to be short. What does that mean? Well, the normal thing is you're in a contango situation where the further out one is at a higher price. And that's because there's expected to be demand. And of course, there's a carrying charge, so that's all built in there. So you're in the contango. When you get into backwardation, well, all of a sudden you have a discount to the futures in the futures, and then essentially you're paying to be short, to be long, and that creates these negative funding rates. It means sellers or shorts are now dominating trading, and sentiment is clearly changing, and it's not to the positive. And add to that, Justice Department seized 127,000 Bitcoin. That's about $15 billion worth from a cybercrime group. This spooked traders also, fearing that that's future supply shocks if these Bitcoin get sold. I know you're going to say, well, the strategic fund is where they hold all their Bitcoin, but they're not buying Bitcoin. And at some point, they're going to realize they need that money, and they're holding a lot of Bitcoin, and that could get sold. I'm not saying it's happening now, but that did affect the market. And then, of course, profit taking after those all-time highs that failed. Bitcoin hit 126,000 on October 6th, but, failure came, and it's triggering some automated profit taking as it starts to move down, and it's getting to some key levels I'll show you. Bitcoin is losing its connection with other risk assets, especially NASDAQ. And Bitcoin is threatening to break a key low, which could bring another selling cascade. Add to that, MicroStrategy, or strategy as they call it now, is a canary in the coal mine, and it's testing key lows after a collapse. Let's take a look here as we look at some charts that I think are going to give you a good sense for what I'm talking about. This is Bitcoin versus NASDAQ daily. And I'm looking at this correlation disconnection that's going on. And you can see in here that there was a really interesting correlation, as this line right over here is NASDAQ and the candlesticks are Bitcoin. And look at how they tracked each other. So I'm back over here, back to the beginning of this year. And you can see when they rallied together. When they sold off together again. S&P 500 and Bitcoin rallied together, sold off together, rallied together. You can see how they move together, and look what's happening now. While the stock market's been strong and is holding up here, Bitcoin is selling off sharply as it fell from 126,000 plus down to about 110,000 right over here. And that is almost getting down to these support levels, which is just under 108,000 or around 108,000. If this then does break, there could really be some significant selling there under that 108,000 level. And then if you look at this kind of wave action that's going on in here, you can see this next one has got a December trough. So that says to me, looking at this, that there's a possibility this breaks and then continues to follow through and falls all the way into December. You'll see as we look at MicroStrategy how that kind of lines up. But this is a bad scenario in here. All of a sudden, Bitcoin, relative to NASDAQ or other risk assets, is very weak. And that could spell some very significant trouble, especially if we break that support level. Let's look at the next chart over here. We're going to look at the same thing, but only on a 2-hour chart. And you can see in here, look at how they followed each other. As they, again, this is S&P, this is NASDAQ, sorry, and this is Bitcoin. And you can see right over here where NASDAQ had that decline, Bitcoin almost took out this low. But then it had this last gasp on the upside in here where everybody had to get in, so they didn't miss the move to 1 million. And yes, it started to fail and move down here. And the reasons I gave you, all of this background stuff that's going on, and Bitcoin is very relatively weak compared to other risk assets. We see that as we see gold and silver flying to the upside, NASDAQ still holding way up here. But Bitcoin, all on its own, moving to the downside. Again, here's that support level in the 108s. It's right around 108,500. Below there, it could be in a lot of trouble. Let's take a look here as we switch over and look at some little longer term charts in here as I get rid of this and we bring in this charts here on MicroStrategy. So this is the weekly chart here on MicroStrategy, and on the left, on the right is the daily chart right over there. And let's blow this up, and you can see again, I'm calling this the canary in the coal mine because this has been a disaster. When you look at this, this is Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy that really looks to me like it's in a lot of trouble. As Bitcoin, of course, moved up and tested the highs, this only got up right over here. I mean, this is up here into this resistance area and absolutely failed. And if you see these troughs right over here, I have these cycle lines drawn in there, and you see the trough right over here. If this gets under this 291 area, this is going to be a nightmare. Now, this points out over here to about 232 right over there as a reasonable target for MicroStrategy. And that, of course, will be proven if you break this low and if we have the Bitcoin market and, of course, the whole crypto complex selling off, which is just looking like it's going to be a good possibility because there has been huge damage. All of those speculators that were in those markets and in those crazy margin positions, well, they now have felt what that feels like to get it wrong. They're not going to be anxious to go in there speculating again. And if anything, probably want to use rallies to get out. And that's what you're seeing going on right now. Let's take a look at the daily chart right over here. And I've got the Bitcoin cycle right over here so that you can see how that acts for MicroStrategy as you make the comparison. What that says to me is that, well, there's a likely decline over here out towards the end of October, and then there's the next move over here where after some rebound, it declines out into December. That December low lines up with this December low right over here. So that means Bitcoin and MicroStrategy are very likely to fall together very significantly. So that's a look at the Bitcoin market and the decoupling syndrome that I see going on right now, and very likely that we're going to see continued weakness in this cryptocurrency area and a possible cascade selling coming again sometime out there. Don't know if it's going to happen in this period between now and the end of October, or if it's just going to kind of hang in there and then really accelerate down into December. There's not really a good way to tell about that, but we can see that this decoupling is going on, and that Bitcoin is much, much weaker than it was before relative to other markets, and that MicroStrategy is plainly a canary in the coal mine because it's saying that the holders in there really don't believe that there is going to be $1 million Bitcoin, probably not $150,000 Bitcoin. At least that's my opinion, because that's Slim's take.